Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Port Phillip City Council. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yalukit Willem clan of the Boonwurrung. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. We acknowledge and uphold their traditional relationship to this land. In the interests of public safety, Council has temporarily closed council meetings to public attendance and instead made meetings available to public participation via live stream, via Council's website and Facebook page. Members of the public wishing to speak to a council item must submit questions and comments on an agenda item online by 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting. I will then read out, where practical, specific questions asked by community members and a brief summary of any comments made on agenda items. Due to the time it would take to read out long submissions, I will use my discretion in this matter, and I will not be repeating questions or comments previously made. Questions or comments read out on behalf of community members will be made available on Council's website following the meeting. Now, moving to the item deviate from order of business, councillors need to consider an item to exclude in-person attendance of members of the public at tonight's meeting. I therefore seek a councillor to move a motion to accept an additional item. Councillor Pearl to move, Councillor Bond to second. I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Now, we've also got a new item, which is Council decision to exclude in-person attendance of members of the public at tonight's meeting. As Victoria has declared a state of emergency in response to the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, under the Occupational Health and Safety Act of the City of Port Phillip, we have an obligation to ensure employees, visitors and the public are free from risk that could impact their health and safety. In line with the advice of health experts, tonight's meeting will be closed to the public attendance and instead made available to the public via live stream, via Council's website and Facebook page. I will now seek a councillor to move the motion that Council A notes that in accordance with its obligation under the Occupational Health and Safety Act 2004, tonight's meeting of the Council will not be open to in-person attendance by members of the public and instead be open and accessible to the public via live stream via Council's website and Facebook page, and B, that members of the public can submit a statement online to an agenda item which may be read out at the Chair's discretion. Councillor Pearl to move, Councillor Gross to second. I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Apologies. And councillors, we're all in attendance now, so there's no apologies. 2, minutes of the previous meetings. So, councillors, the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on March the 18th and the special meetings held on 19th of March and the 25th of March have been circulated. Are there any questions in relation to these? No, there are none. If not, so can I have a mover for that? Councillor Simic to move, Councillor Baxter to second. I'll put that. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 3, declarations of conflicts of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict in any matters on tonight's agenda? I note there are none. Item 4, petitions and joint letters. So, councillors, we have one joint letter on tonight's agenda, which is 4.1, request from residents of Bridge Street and Glover Streets for extension of island in middle of Pickles Street so that cars cannot cross over Pickles Street between Bridge and Glover Streets. And we don't have anyone that's requested to speak or put in a submission. So, councillors, do you have any questions? We've got an officer's recommendation to accept the report. Councillor Crawford to move and Councillor Copsey to second. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 5, sealing schedule, and we don't have any documents that require sealing. Move to item 6, which is public question time. And councillors, we have one person, one group that has requested to ask a question tonight. And so I'll just read this out. And it's from Campbell Spence, the President of Ratepayers of Port Phillip. The Ratepayers of Port Phillip Inc are concerned that the City of Port Phillip's current 2019-2020 budget is likely to now have a large deficit. Since the COVID-19 emergency has hit Australia, council non-rates revenue from sectors such as parking fees, fines, childcare and asset leases will be significantly reduced. It's also possible that some ratepayers may be unable to pay their rates for some time. At the same time, Council has been silent on how it will manage its expenditure to address the fall in revenue. We were shocked to see no mention of this incredibly important topic on the 15th of April meeting agenda. The time to address this issue is fast disappearing. If Council's revenue has fallen and expenditure stays the same, the only way to meet the shortfall will be by commensurately increasing debt. How big is the forecasted deficit in the current 2019-20 accounts? Will this be met by increasing debt? What is the impact of the 2021 budget? We expect to see a detailed action plan for how the CEO is proposing to address declining revenues and the cost base for both the 2019-2020 and the 2020 and 21 financial years. Currently, the Council has been silent, and we are therefore concerned about whether there is a plan at all. Last stop point is, have councillors demanded from the CEO a full report on council finances? If the CEO and his staff cannot present a clear plan to balance the books without increasing rates or relying on debt, councillors must use their powers to address management competency. We remind the councillors that you represent residents and ratepayers. You cannot allow council to borrow its way out of this budget mess. This will only defer the problem and extend it out to future generations. Okay, so I'm happy to answer that, CEO. So like all businesses, Council's not immune to the impacts of COVID-19. Council's been receiving weekly detailed budget briefings from the CEO and officers on the impact of Council's finances as a result of the COVID-19. At this point, we estimate the impact to be likely in the order of $40 million, of which $20 million will be felt in 2019-2020 and $20 million in 2020-21. Significant savings have already been identified for the remainder of this financial year, and Council is working on finding additional savings for financial year 21. Our total council budget is around $230 million each year, so the impact will be significant. This impact is the result of a decline in revenue from a range of sources, for example, permits and events, increasing costs that were occurring prior to COVID-19, e.g. the landfill levy, and cost shifting from other tiers of government. We were in the final stages of preparing our draft 2020-21 budget when the COVID-19 started to assert itself. Unfortunately, the financial impact of the pandemic on councils is significant, which means Council is unable to proceed with the budget it has planned for 2020-21. Council's working diligently with financial discipline to prepare a revised budget for 2021, which we look forward to talking with you about in more detail and engaging with you as soon as possible. The Minister for Local Government has provided councils with an extension by which it can finalise its budget this year, given the unprecedented circumstances, until the end of August 2020. We want to ensure that certainty is provided to our ratepayers as soon as possible, but also want to ensure that you have an opportunity to help shape the budget given these unprecedented circumstances. So we're working as quickly as we can to get our community involved in the process. So the 6 financial disciplines that we're applying include not seeking an increase to the existing rate cap or additional borrowing. We're prioritising everything we are doing and looking carefully at all opportunities to save costs. We're ensuring that we protect the well-being of our community, particularly the most vulnerable. We're minimising the impacts of service closures and reductions on the community. We're looking at ways to provide additional relief to impacted businesses and ratepayers. And we are retaining essential capacity to start up again and help our community recover as quickly as possible. This is an immense challenge, but one that is critical to the future of our municipality. And as we, councillors, are playing our part in ensuring that this significant piece of work is undertaken diligently and with great care and as quickly as possible. So we look forward to discussing this more with our community over the coming weeks. And that's the only question from the public. I'll move to item 7, which is councillor question time. Councillor Pearl.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just wondering if the CEO could give us an update on any developments from the state government to be able to allow councils to meet online and how that would potentially affect the delegations that were passed by this council in the past few weeks.
Through you, Mayor, and thank you for the question, Councillor Pearl. I understand the Premier announced today that he's recalling Parliament to amend the Local Government Act to allow councils excuse me, to vote to meet digitally or in a virtual room. That will significantly relieve me of the responsibility of having to carry the delegations that Council have given me, and I look forward to Council being able to fully exercise their powers and duties as the civic leaders of this community.
Thank you, Mr Smith. Any other questions, councillors? No, then we'll move to the reports. The first up is a presentation of the CEO report, issue 64. Any questions, councillors? I just wanted to remind the public that are watching here tonight that councillors have had a significant opportunity to ask and delve into detail on all of these reports, so to minimise the time that we are here together today. So if there are no questions, I will ask for a mover for that report. Councillor Copsey to move, Councillor Baxter to second. Would anyone like to speak to that report? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 9.1, which is the Community Grants Assessment Panel Reference Committee, the appointment for 2020. Now, are there any questions on this? If not, I require a mover to also put in the nomination for this report. Councillor Pearl?
Yeah, just insert the name Jamie. I can't find it. Jamie Brunton. Brunton, isn't it?
Jamie Brunton.
Brunton.
Correct.
Here it is. Sorry, Brunton.
Terrific. It's up there. Happy to second. Councillor Gross. Would you like to speak to it? Would anyone like to speak? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll move to 11.1, which is the Port Phillip Emergency Climate Action Network, the joint letter regarding Council's response to climate emergency.
Madam Mayor, could I just intervene, just ask a question? I've just been communicating with somebody about how the sound quality is in here, and they say that the live streaming doesn't seem to be working.
Will the officers please check that the live streaming is working?
It's working because I've had it on before.
Okay. I do notice it's better sounding than it is to us.
Yes.
We have a terrible echo.
I guess my subsidiary question would be the sound. We've got the loudspeakers on, but nobody needs the loudspeakers, and it might be reverberating back into the public, into the broadcast sound.
Okay, we'll get the officers to check on that, and I'm sure that they will do whatever they can. It's a thumbs up. Looks like it's good.
I can hear you loud and clear, Councillor Brand.
Okay,
excellent.
So 11.1, which is the Port Phillip Emergency Climate Action Network joint letter, as I've just mentioned, and we have a letter that has a submission that's been submitted by the Port Phillip Emergency Climate Action Network, PCAN, and I will read that out. I think next time I'm going to get one of the councillors to do some of the reading. I seem to be doing a lot of it. Okay, Pecan thanks the council officers for their report to council in response to our joint letter submitted to the 18th of March council meeting. We're also pleased to have had a productive online meeting with Miss Lily Rosick and Mr Mark Casanet on the 31st of March to discuss the joint letter and our request for regular dialogue and increased community participation in council's plans and actions to address climate change. At that meeting, we all acknowledged the enormous challenges that council faces currently in responding to the COVID-19 crisis. But we also talked about the critical importance of facing these challenges in partnership with the community. Much creativity is needed in exploring new ways of doing this, both in relation to the immediate crisis, but also in relation to other activities of council, such as its ongoing response to the climate crisis. We discussed an online alternative to our original request town hall meeting, and we're pleased that the officer's recommendation includes the idea of a council running webinars, both to inform the citizens of Port Phillip about council actions to address the climate emergency and to identify opportunities for council action. Pecan is keen to be involved in publicising these events and in participating in them. We're also pleased that the report at paragraph 4.16 responds to our request for a regular meeting between council officers and Pecan representatives as key stakeholders in council's ongoing response to climate change. We do ask, though, that this meeting be held on a bi-monthly basis rather than a quarterly as is proposed, in order to develop ongoing and constructive dialogue about joint council and community action, especially as it seems there's no appetite for establishing an advisory committee to work with council, at least ahead of the next council election in October. We acknowledge that past experiences of such committees have sometimes been fraught, and perhaps here again there needs to be some constructive discussion about new ways of partnering with the community. Indeed, the Local Government Act 2020 requires renewed commitment and new approaches to community engagement in the work of councils, and we look forward to being involved in those processes. Peter Moriartis, Judy Gunson, Jack Halliday and Rhonda Small on behalf of Pecan. Councillors, any questions to this report? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that or something different? Councillor Brand and Councillor Copsey to second. Councillor Brand, would you like to speak? Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Copsey.
I'll just note that there's a small alt-rec from the officers to correct a figure from what was in the papers.
Thank you very much, actually, for reminding me there is an alt-rec, which I believe is the 3.4, notes that the average annual rates expenditure on sustainability during this council plan 2017 to 27 has increased. Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? All those against? That motion's carried. Now we'll move to 13.1, Community Gardens Assessment Guidelines. There's no members of the public that have requested to speak to this. Councillors, do we have a... Councillor Copsey, you have an alternative motion?
I do. I actually have a motion for deferral of this item.
Can you please read the motion?
The motion is 3.1, that this item be deferred.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pearl to second. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Just say we've done quite a bit of work on this. Just before we adopt it finally, I wanted to take the opportunity to make sure that this is a very accessible document and that's fitting our intended purpose and the community's intended purpose. So I just wanted to have a short deferral in order to finalise some last-minute adjustments to it.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Would anyone else like to speak? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll move to 13.2, which is the Library Action Plan draft for public consultation. Now we've had two submitters. I'll read the first one. They are quite short. On behalf of the Middle Park Library Action Group, the Action Group acknowledges that City of Port Phillip's budget is under enormous pressure due to the significant decline in revenue. This has been exacerbated by the consequences of COVID-19 pandemic. The responses to the financial and social challenges that Port Phillip residents of all ages and council staff face will shape the future fabric of our communities. The role of local libraries as a vital and valued community service, providing for social wellbeing of the communities, is affirmed by the Municipal Association of Victoria. On Wednesday the 15th of April, Council will be asked to approve a draft library plan to go ahead for 1 month's community consultation before its scheduled adoption in July-August 2020. The current closure of public libraries, halls, etc., as well as social distancing and isolation measures, prevent many residents participating in the consultation in a meaningful way. When public health restrictions are eased, the resumption of existing library services and other social facilities will be essential to the recovery of the whole Port Phillip community. So accordingly, the Action Group urges Council to defer adopting any decisions on the draft library action plan until the social and financial impacts of the current crisis are fully assessed. Yours truly, James Willett, President, Yvonne Lynch, Vice President, Ian Angus, Secretary, Julie Johnson, and Amanda Best, committee members. The second submission is from Michael Sabata of South Melbourne. I wish to submit to councillors that the Library Action Plan should be delayed for public comment in light of the current emergency. Consultation will be insufficient as, having no physical access to the library service, most library users are unlikely to be aware of the plan and no face-to-face consultation can occur, as well as events are likely to render the plan moot and certainly impact the proposed timings for actions in the draft plan. If councillors believe the plan must go out for public comment, then the implementation strategy timeline needs to be amended with the time out for public comment increased by at least another month to 2 months. The proposed business as usual public consultation for 1 month does not suit the times for reasons that are self-evident. The proposed communication strategy is insufficient. Virtual meetings are required, e.g. Skype, Teams, Zoom. Okay, so that's the members of the public. Councillors, do you have any questions? Now, do we have a mover for the Councillor Pearl?
Mayor, just wondering if I put an alternate motion up, if possible.
Thank you. What is your alternative motion?
The alternate motion is for item 3.2, Library Action Plan draft for public consultation. The alt motion is 3.1, that this item is deferred.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bond? Did you want to speak to the
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the two submitters that provided feedback to us this evening. We're effectively following their lead that they've provided, and those letters detail a fairly pragmatic and reasonable approach to what's happening outside these four walls at the moment. There's two primary reasons for this deferral. One is meaningful consultation is needed on this item, and that is very difficult under the current situation. Secondly, the budget position of the council and the uncertainty of that budget position will mean that this policy will have to be reviewed in the future. So we seek this deferral to buy officers a little bit more time to allow this policy to go back out and have a meaningful impact based on the new world we currently live in. Thank you again to the two submitters.
Councillor Bond, would you like to speak? Would anyone else like to speak? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Terrific. So 14.1 is the exercise of delegations by the CEO. Any questions from the councillors? And do I have a mover for that? Councillor Pearl to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bond to second. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Pearl?
Just quickly make sure I'm talking to the right motion here. Yep, 14.1. Okay, it's important to note a small thing attached to the details that are in this report. These are the following motions that, to the best of the assessment based on the delegation that was provided to the CEO two weeks ago, that he's used that would normally come to a council meeting. That is the actions to close the assist counters, changes to diversity magazine, a planning matter regarding Montague Commercial Precinct heritage, the closure of beach and the botanical gardens, the closure of skate parks and exercise stations, and access to showers in Peanut Farm Reserve, and then reopening the botanical gardens were the only actions in this report that were done under the delegation the additional delegation that was provided by this council, which will probably be revoked as soon as possible in the next few weeks when the state government moves. It's important that the public know and understand why decisions are being made by the CEO and what delegation he is using to exercise that power, and that's very clear in this report.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Then I will put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll move to the three planning reports. Thank you. And we'll just change the chairs over. Just 1 second. I'm going to get some people to do some reading instead of me. Thank you. All right, we'll go to item 12.1, which is the statutory planning delegated decisions, March 2020. There are no speakers. Councillors, do you have any questions of the delegated decisions? If not, do I have a mover for that or something? Councillor Brand to move and Councillor Copsey to second. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Next, we'll move to 12.2, which is 332 Carlisle Street, Balaclava. And to make it clear that there is an officers alt-rec, which I'll speak to a bit later on. Now, I've been doing all the reading of the submissions. Councillor Baxter, I believe there's 2 submissions to this item. Would you please read both of them?
Sure, I'll read out 2 submissions. The first is Dr. Yuri Shamas on behalf of YSVG Shared Living in support of the above-mentioned application. It reads... Oh, is this cutting out? It reads, firstly, thank you for reviewing the proposal and for the planner's support for the change of use to a rooming house. We agree to the proposed conditions and believe that allowing the ground floor dwelling to be used as a rooming house rather than an 8-bedroom apartment leased by one group of friends will ensure a significant improvement to tenant screening, noise management, alcohol control and rubbish disposal. In regards to the signage, please note that in order to minimise on planning application costs, the owner of 330 Carlisle Street, Balaclava, Glicks, agreed to have one single application rather than 2 separate ones. Glicks is in the correct zoning for such signage and there should be no reason it is not permitted. Furthermore, the sign that is currently displayed in our front yard is identically located and dimensioned to the previous sign that was displayed for the doctor's surgery, previous use of the ground floor property. Add to that the dental surgery 2 doors down, which also zoned GRZ1, has a number of large signs, including one that is illuminated. The sign should therefore be allowed to remain. So that's the submission from Dr. Yuri Shamas, and there's also a submission from James McGann, Director of McGann Architects Proprietary Limited. In support of the above-mentioned application, we offer the following comments. We support Martin Cooksley's, Senior Urban Planner's, recommendation, Part A, to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit for the use of land for a rooming house and signage at 332 Carlisle Street, Balaclava, subject to the conditions. We accept all the proposed conditions as outlined in the report. If the council support the application for the building to be used as a rooming house, it will allow the operator, YSVG Shared Living, to implement an on-site management plan that includes the proposed council conditions. This on-site management plan would mean that the rooming house tenancy agreement would have more conditions on expected behaviour, house rules and operating procedures. These conditions cannot be implemented under the current building use and tenancy agreement. The operator welcomes the additional proposed conditions that will allow them to implement an on-site management plan. Condition 1B, the panel sign fixed to the wall of 330 Carlisle Street to be deleted. Please note the property at 330 Carlisle Street is zoned Commercial 1 zone and signs the size we proposed we understand are acceptable. Please note Condition 1C, the home-based business sign within the front yard was an existing sign that was at the property prior to the current tenant moving in. The size and shape of the sign has not changed, only the lettering. And that appears to be the end of that submission.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? Councillor Brand.
If this sign is if the sign or the signs are the same as pre-existing, I'm just wondering what the point is of refusing to allow them now.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Chair. The previous or existing sign was actually a business identification sign for the previous dental surgery on the ground level. The signs proposed are for the home occupation or the home-based business, which exists on the first floor. The signage requirements within the planning scheme differ between a home-based business and a business identification. To finish that off, a home-based business is only allowed a size of a sign of 0.2 square metres. A business identification sign has no limit, but does need a planning permit.
Okay. Any other questions, councillors? If not, we have an officer's recommendation, which does have a slight change to the name of the delegate from Manager Statutory Planning to CEO. Do I have a mover for that, for the motion or something different? Councillor Copsey to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pearl to second. Would you like to speak to the motion? Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Then I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll go to item 12.3, which is 245 to 247 and 249 to 251 Normanby Road, South Melbourne. And councillors, this report was amended and recirculated following distribution of the agenda. The details of the amendments have been provided to councillors and added to the website. The report we are now considering is the updated and recirculated report. Now, Councillor Pearl, I believe you've got some submissions there.
I have one submission from Angela Croms, the Senior Planner at SJB Planning. I think it's just the one. Let me just check. Yep, there is. I'll paraphrase some of this because I don't think I'll get it out in the time allotted. SJB Planning acts for the applicant in the matter listed at section 12.3 in tonight's meeting agenda. We wish to make the following submission in relation to this item. We wish to preface our submission with the understanding that everyone is operating in unprecedented times. Our client is experienced in construction and development and is ready to go. Our client has a heads of agreement with Blackstone to develop the approved building as build to rent. The deal with Blackstone was contingent on a decision by DWELP no later than March. We are now past March, but we are instructed that Blackstone is yet to withdraw from the agreement, but is likely to do so if a decision is not made within the next few weeks. Should this occur, it will cause significant financial distress to our client. The amendments sought as part of this Section 72 application are simply refinements of an existing permit. They reflect minor changes to an already approved building and one that is ready for construction. The key components are dual key apartment layout. This is proposed to enable the proposed investor to construct the development of a build to rent. Our client is not abrogating its responsibility to provide 6% affordable housing, but is looking for greater flexibility in order to deliver it. From a policy point of view, we submit the proposed dual key apartment layout, sorry, it's a bit of a spello here, to respond to the policy. In particular, they refer to Clause 16, Clauses 22.15 of the Port Phillip Planning Scheme. Clause 16, it talks about increasing the supply of housing, increasing the housing yield in appropriate locations, maximising opportunities for urban renewal projects, increasing density where it's appropriate to do so, ensuring housing stock matches changing demand, widening housing choice, etc. And then refers to Clause 22.15, which talks about delivering housing opportunities for a diverse community, providing at least 6% dwellings of affordable housing and encouraging housing diversity support a diverse and inclusive community. And then it also details 5 or 6 more points from section 22.15. It goes on also to talk about the building facade. In response to the concerns raised about the building facade, our client has been investigating a redesign for the tower facade to reflect amendments to the floor plans and to increase the slenderness of the tower. These redesigns were forwarded to council officers on April 8th. The slab edges have been amended so that the vertical language of the building is strengthened. It then talks more about the vertical extension. It ends by saying, we respectfully request that the redesign of the facade satisfies council officers' early concerns should be supported by council. It then goes on to talk about car parking and bicycle provision. The endorsed development provided a car park ratio of 0.6 car spaces per dwelling, with the increase in provision of car spaces to 231. The car parking ratio is commensurate with an increase in apartment, excluding the dual key apartment ratio of 0.5 and includes a dual key apartment ratio of 0.68. The proposed development has been in the planning approvals arena for some time and is stuck between having been approved in the previous planning control regime and the current planning controls introduced by Amendment GC81. As previously stated, our client is shovel ready but dependent on the proposed minor refinements to plans in Section 72 application being approved. We respectfully request that Council support the amendment in this Section 72 application and advise DWELP of its support. I have paraphrased a number of things out of that, but I'm sure that can be put in the minutes if required. I think I've covered everything that was meant to be intended in that letter.
Well done, quite a long submission, Councillor Pearl, thank you. The councillors were provided all of these documents in advance, so this is not the first time that they're being heard, just if you're wondering. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers for this application? If not, we have an officer's alternative recommendation. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Pearl to move. Councillor Brand to second. Would you like to speak any more, Councillor Pearl? Councillor, no? Would anyone else? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so that's the end of the reports, and so notices of motions, and we don't have any notices of motion tonight. 16, are there any reports by councillor delegates? Not tonight. 17, urgent business. Is there any councillors with urgent business? Not tonight. 18, then we go into confidential matters. So councillors, we've got one confidential item tonight, being 18.1, which is about the transfer of council shareholding